everyone. Welcome to MiTech Tuesday, MillenniumIT ESP's mini webinars during which we intend to share knowledge on areas that we're experts in or other trending topics. My name is Nadin Suryarachi and I'm here representing the marketing and branding team at MIT ESP. I will also be your host for the day. Did you know that 15% of the world is considered to have some sort of disability? As such, it's very important that organizations, whether they're tech companies or businesses, think about inclusivity and accessibility when they design products or services. However, there are few ways an organization can get on board. Number one, inclusivity, meaning that existing products or services are built keeping everyone in mind. Or else they can use technology and tools to develop assistive tech, that is to help those with disability or even for early identification with disabilities. So in today's session, we intend to draw attention to the need to be more inclusive when it comes to persons of disability, especially in the tech field. We're hoping to create awareness and propel you to think about the use of technology and show you how we all should start using technology solutions to make the lives of those with disability a little bit easier. So today we decided to spin things up a little bit. We have a very interesting panel of experts who are here to share their insights and talk on today's topic of technology inclusion for disability. We have a few of them joining us both from international markets as well as the local environment. So since they're all very outstanding leaders in their field of work, let me now formally introduce all of them. Starting with Pratik Madhav. Pratik is the co-founder and CEO of Assist Tech Foundation, or else ATF. ATF has already impacted the lives of 422,000 of people with disabilities through its portfolio of 21 assistive technology startups with 50 plus assistive technology products. ATF aims to positively impact the lives of 3.4 million people by the end of 2024, people with disabilities. Before ATF, Pratik was at Accenture and he held the position of General Manager, Analytics and New Initiatives. And before that, he held the position of Advisor and CEO at Samardhanam Trust for the Disabled. Pratik brings to the table 20 plus years of experience in IT outsourcing industry and the social sector, and his belief in technology is making a significant impact in the lives of persons with disabilities. Pratik's interests do not stop there. He's a marathon runner and a running coach. Pratik, welcome on board. Glad to have you here. Next, we have Gopi Kitnasamy. Gopi is the head of rehabilitation services at MTF Charitable Foundation, and they're both a partner and a client at MillenniumIT ESP. The MTF Foundation, which is a philanthropic arm of Dilma Ceylon Tea, aims to work with undeserved communities, investing long-term in the lives of women, men, girls, and boys to ensure that they have control of their future and they will also be able to pay it forward to their own communities. With over 22 years of experience working with children with special needs, Gopi is also the founder and chairman of Cerebral Palsy Lanka Foundation. He's the project lead for the 1,000 Wheelchairs project. And under that project, they have distributed 2,400 special pediatric wheelchairs to 23 districts in Sri Lanka up until now. They have also won the Merit Award at the World CP Day in 2017. Gopi is also the project lead for Avaz Sri Lanka, which is the first ACC app with Sri Lankan languages for persons with communication difficulties. With MillenniumIT ESP, in October 2020, he worked on the launch of the disability app powered by a health vision solution, introducing a first-of-its-kind app globally with telescreening and teletherapy services. Gopi, as a parent of two extraordinary children, one of whom has cerebral palsy, this is close to his heart. Gopi, we are glad to have you here as a panelist today. Then we have Pete Horsley. Pete is the founder of Remarkable, the startup venture arm of Cerebral Palsy Alliance, whose mission is to harness tech and innovation for all human potential. Pete is a catalytic leader for global change on disability inclusion and is one of the co-founders at Plus and Inclusive Innovation Network, a global ecosystem of partners who shape future technologies that power barriers for disability inclusion. Bringing over 15 years of experience in the disability sector across a variety of roles, Pete started his career as a landscape architect who saw the potential for design and innovation to create positive, systematic change. Pete, thank you so much for joining our discussion today. Next, we have our very own Calvin Hindle. Calvin is a thought leader and a technology evangelist with 8+ years of experience in the areas of customer experience, artificial intelligence, machine learning, RPA, and product development. He's currently leading the disability solution on behalf of MIT ESP. Calvin has been recognized as a Microsoft MVP in AI this year, and he's also a General Council member at Slasco. Thank you, Calvin, for being part of this discussion today here, representing MillenniumIT ESP. Last but not least, we have Peter de Almeida with us. Peter is the founder and former CEO at Enable, a company that provides technology-enabled business solutions, connecting people and things with insight for an efficient and intelligent world. Prior to that, Peter was also part of MillenniumIT ESP's family, holding the position of CEO in 2007. And before that, he was a banker working at the Synod Bank Employers Union. Peter is passionate about forging new pathways of insight and opening up spaces for collaborative genius to flourish, which influence his personal and professional approach on the stage and as CEO. Bringing to the IT industry over 25 years of experience, Peter is also a personality known as a famous orator, actor, director, but he's here with us today as the moderator of today's panel discussion. Peter, it's lovely to have you on board.
Thank you very much, Nandini. Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be, I'm happy that you invited me to be a part of this, because I feel that preparing for this, I learned so much that I didn't know of. So thank you for that opportunity. So should we get started, Nandini?
Yes, Peter, just to make a small announcement, I'd like to inform everyone that you can ask questions as the session is going on. You can use the Q&A feature that you should be able to find at the bottom part of your screens. And of course, we will tackle any questions you have at the end of the session. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much. So since we have an hour, I think we'll get started straight away. So what I'd like to do is to have each of the speakers give us their thoughts on this topic and their perspective and their experience very briefly, maybe 3 to 4 minutes each of them would take. And then I would ask some questions. We'll have some moderated session interspersed with questions from you. So please use this opportunity to try and understand a little more about the subject and try and figure out how you can be a part of this very, very important initiative that is trying to include 1 billion of the global population. So let's get started. May I invite you, Pete, to give your thoughts first, please?
Okay. Well, let me say I'm really glad to be with you. I'm calling from Sydney, Australia. And it's great to be with you this evening and to talk about this really important topic. And I think I wanted to share just a couple of brief things, brief thoughts with you. And first of those is that I think that disability is actually very close to us all, whether that be us experiencing that disability personally, whether it be a mother or father, a sister or brother, a son or daughter, or whether it's us into the future, that as we age, we know that we are going to have and acquire disabilities as we age. And so if we're not thinking about our current selves or someone that we love, we are thinking about someone that perhaps is us into the future. And really that then, I guess, leads us to think about this as not just a small niche market. We did hear earlier in the introduction that there's 15% of the world's population that identify as having a disability, and yet it will touch us all in one way or another as we live our lives. And so really, when we think about creating inclusive or accessible technology, this isn't just something nice to have, it is something that is absolutely fundamentally essential to make those. Probably the second thing is thinking about technology can be a great enabler or a great inhibitor. It can help to break down barriers to inclusion. And we have a great opportunity right now to do that. And to do that, I wanted to share just a really brief story. And that was a number of years ago, we ran a competition asking people, particularly with cerebral palsy all over the world, what's one thing that would change their world? And we had a man by the name of Alpa who was living in Bursa, Turkey, who said the thing that would change his world was a solar-powered wheelchair. And he said that at the time, his powered chair did not provide enough power to enable him to get over to the temple that he wanted to worship at on the other side of town. He also said where he could afford to live was too far away from where most of the jobs were. So he was stuck in this position of not being able to afford to buy a new wheelchair in order to get to where the jobs actually were. We created a prototype of that thing. It probably is to this day still one of the ugliest prototypes I think I've ever seen, but it worked. It was a solar-powered wheelchair, had panels on it, and we shipped that prototype over to Alpa in Turkey. Within a day, he had actually sent us a photo of himself outside that temple, and he said, "This is the temple that I wanted to worship at." About 6 weeks later, we found out that he had a part-time job. And so this is technology that is enabling, not inhibiting. It allowed him to participate, to be active in his faith, also active in the workforce. And then probably the third thing, I think that it's a little known fact perhaps that there is a great history of tech innovation that has come from the disability community. The constraint or the requirements that we need around disability actually provide a really rich innovation area that we can look to in order to design new things. So our phones obviously all have the ability to speak to them, or they to speak to us now. Those were actually designed first for people with disability. And so I see that as a really rich and fertile ground for us to be thinking about innovation in a new way. So they're just a few thoughts, Peter. I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you very much, Pete. Very interesting that you spoke about the fact that, we are not only talking about those who are disabled as we understand today, but very, very interesting that you said it could be one of us. So in that sense, particularly with the lifestyle that some people lead, you might see a greater number of so-called disabled people outside of the traditional definition. So thank you for bringing that perspective and striking home the urgency of and the scale, scope of what we are trying to do. Thank you very much. May I now invite Gopi from the MJF Charitable Foundation. Gopi, would you like to share some thoughts and experience with our viewers today, please?
Hi, Peter, and thank you, Millen, for inviting. This is a very timely sort of a webinar. I should thank MillenniumIT for organizing this, because in 3 days' time we are going to celebrate the International Day for Persons with Disability, and it's very happy to be part of this. And the introduction I mentioned about this Avas app, we have been working with technology, particularly for children with special needs, because for most people, technology is makes things easier. But for people with disability, it makes it possible, which is very important, because not only for individuals, it's also for the families, for the caretakers, and also for professionals working with these children or with the persons with disability. It makes things possible, because that's the most important thing, because it can make it easy, accessible, or it can make things easier. But making it possible is something that's very important, because otherwise it's not going to work. Because without these assistive technologies, the persons with disability will not be able to get educated or even to find a job. Because Pete mentioned about an interesting story, because it's that's how simple things can make change in not only the individual's life, also in the whole family and even the community. This technology not only help them to sort of in the basic for say to take care of themselves and to be in the community, but also to get participated in the community, to get involved which is a very important thing because say I'll share a sort of very short story because my son has a communication problem. He has a cerebral palsy and he has a communication disability. So we were trying a different aspect because then we tried with low tech, even sign languages, picture cards, and stuff like that. And then we worked on another project called Avas Sri Lanka, which is to introduce the first communication app for Sri Lanka in the local language, because that's very important. It has to be locally and customized to local setting, because there can be some technology which is in a very sort of another country, which is not accessible to the local people or even adaptable to the local people. So that's very important. This innovation has to be locally made. And so that actually not only helped him, helped thousands of children and other people hours as communication for their communication problem. Now he is using an eye gaze even to chat with his friends. So see, the technology has helped him to sort of communicate with his friends. Otherwise, not at all possible. Otherwise, it's a dream. And imagine the frustration not only for him when he can't express the when he can't express what he wants to express. As a parent, it's a very frustrating situation. And as per the UN Convention of Rights for Persons with Disability, it states to promote the availability of appropriate devices and mobility aids and improve the accessibility for these devices. But unfortunately, in the low middle income countries, less than 5 to 15% are having access to these devices. Not only this, I'm not talking about the high-tech software and stuff like that, even basic touches, wheelchairs, and see, that's the reason why we started this wheelchair project. We didn't have a pediatric wheelchair when we searched for a pediatric wheelchair for my son. That's when we realized the importance of a pediatric wheelchair, which is a basic wheelchair. We don't need a powered wheelchair here. Even these basic ones were not available. So this is very important. And also see, local innovation is what we have to support. And also there should be legislation when they make apps or websites locally. There should be legislations to help them make it a point, make it strict that it has to be available for anyone, not just for people who can access it. And also when there are innovations, like even as Pete said about the solar powered wheelchair, see, when there are local innovation, there are a lot of local innovation happening. But the problem is they are not able to take it to the next step because availability of funds, and there are no, because there is always a saying that the consumer market in Sri Lanka is very less. So it's not going to be a sort of a commercial value for the product to be sort of supported. It's not the case because you can take it to the other local low middle income countries, to the other countries. So don't think about just the commercial value of these product. Sometimes a very simple changes you make in these devices can be adaptable, can be used for thousands of people. That's why we have to insist on these local innovation, particularly from a low middle income country. I will insist on that because these assistive devices should be available for everyone. That's my thoughts on data.
Great ideas you have expressed, Gopi, especially the point about local innovation and the role of the state actually in terms of legislation. It's only through legislation sometimes can we drive really important change. So thank you for those very insightful ideas on this topic. Thank you very much. Next, I will invite Prateek from Assist Tech. Prateek, would you like to share your thoughts, please?
Thank you, Peter, and thank you to MillenniumIT for inviting us, and thanks to you for putting all of us together from different geographies and representing different time zones. Peter, time and again, we talk about these 1 billion people with disabilities. But a lot of time when you observe, people quote this number as an issue or a problem, right? As we have always taken a view of charity when we talk about this, and we're talking about world's largest minority, right? If all these people form a country, we're going to be a very populous country, right? But my observation has been that we always take a very problematic view when we talk about this population. And I think my point of view is we shouldn't. Let me tell you the other side of it, why this matters. These 1 billion people with disability also collectively represent US $8 trillion of disposable income. If they were considered as human beings, as customers, as you and I are, which essentially means that they could be the third largest economic power in the world above Japan, Germany, and United Kingdom. I'll give you another number by which, I'd like to request and, develop a point of view that if we include people with disability in workforce, we're going to add 5 to 7% of GDP. In countries like India and Sri Lanka, it can mean a lot. But today we take a worldview where we, as people, live in 21st century. Technology has really disrupted our life, right? I mean, the way we shop, the way we watch content, the way we, travel, everything is disrupted by technology. But when we look at people with disabilities in our countries and outside, we suddenly go back to 14th century and we try to use older method to solve that problem of mobility, problem of communication, any such problem. And I'm here to tell you that at ATF, we are taking a new view. We are trying to bring a new thinking of using innovation, tech innovation, and startups to solve a lot of problems. We have built a network of 350 startups in India and outside as well. In fact, Pete is here. With Pete and 7 other countries, we have formed a global alliance, Plus N, which is interested in innovation, startup, and investment in assistive technology. And I can't tell you enough how excited we are with the solutions we are seeing globally, which are attempting to solve the problems of people with disability. And hence, just to conclude, tech can help because it doesn't discriminate. At ATF, we are now trying to impact lives of 3.4 million of people with disability in next 3 years. Plus N probably is going to do 10x in next 3 years. So we are very, very excited to take a new point of view, new approaches, using startup technology to solve these problems, which haven't been solved for decades. So I'm very excited, but thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Pratik. That's a great perspective that you gave us about this way of looking at this number, somewhat in a sort of a sympathetic or a slightly negative or problematic view. So I think that's a great way of changing the perspective of the subject matter itself. Thank you very much for that. I'll come back to you with some specific, ask you for examples of some of the wonderful work that you're doing. Last but not least, let's have Calvin. Calvin, would you like to share some thoughts on the topic? You being one of the movers of this event as well. Just share some thoughts with us, please.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. So I was very fortunate to be a part of this disability platform project, which we started with the MJ Foundation during the COVID-19 pandemic. And it has personally made me rethink the purpose of technology, because most of the time we look at technology innovation and the fanciness of the jargons, and we mostly build solutions probably for other businesses to create more wealth. But don't you think that that sole purpose alone for the past couple of years have brought us up to this state where we have climate issues, we have healthcare problems. So I guess refocusing technology and innovation to the real world problem has to happen right now. And that has become a big eye-opener for me personally, because all of this fancy technology we talk about is always about creating wealth, to other businesses, right? And we have been doing that from the, I would say, the Industrial Revolution. But has that, served the larger cause? And it has brought us to a very critical stage in the world. We all know about the climate problems, the COVID-19 pandemics we are facing right now. If we are so high-tech and we are so innovative, these problems shouldn't be there. So the focus of innovation and technology really needs to rechange. And disability inclusivity is also one really important part of it. And I totally agree with Gopi. Unfortunately, this part of the world, even in Sri Lanka and this part, when we are building technology products and solutions, we really don't think about it. I mean, we are also part of that problem as people from the technology world. We see banks releasing mobile wallets, this and that about digital transformation, but can a person with inclusivity and disability access it? No, no one really talks about it. And if you look at countries like the US, they have civil rights. I will tell you a story where a popular pizza brand, right, got sued for millions of dollars because they didn't create the app, the online ordering app, to be supported for people with disability and people who can't see. So these are civil rights and these are civil acts. So those kind of, you don't have to go to those kind of regulations. You can design the product from ground up, thinking about inclusivity. And as Naduni clearly mentioned, if you look at the technology, where the technology can play, I think that it can play in 3 areas. One is when you are developing solutions, thinking of inclusivity and disability in the core, right? Not just an add-on. And the other part is where we can use technology to develop assistive technology, assistive products. Now, for example, there are some mobile apps where people who are blind can simply go to a restaurant and hold that mobile app and take a picture of the menu, and it will read the menu for you. And it uses computer vision to describe the surroundings with smart glasses. And also some of the products, like example, what we have developed with the MJ Foundation, using early identification, so that children, if you identify certain disabilities at an early stage, you can reduce that damage, and people are not aware of this. So that is what we are doing with this disability platform, where any of the public can access this and upload their children's information, pictures, videos, and the MJF team can connect remotely and help them. So I think technology really needs to play a better part than just creating economic wealth for other businesses and countries. I think we are at a very critical stage in terms of sustainability and all of this. So that is my personal thought on this.
That's a fantastic perspective, Calvin, to change the whole focus of this discussion into this whole idea of how we have been caught up with technology being there to create greater wealth and profits and so on. But great part of humanity is left behind, and start thinking seriously about how technology can work for the many and not for the few, to borrow a phrase from Bernie Sanders from US. Okay, so thank you very much. This is, I think the introduction itself has opened the minds to so many different aspects of this topic for the viewers, which in itself I think has been extremely valuable to get them thinking about this issue as something that they could be a part of solving. So in terms of questions, Pratik, I'll go to you first, because you are talking about, because I'm just wondering if you could share examples, because you're talking about startups and how you're getting startups to focus on this issue, correct? Because as your name implies, assist tech. Can you take an example or two? Because, when there is such a wide area to be addressed, as we have heard, because we are not only talking information technology, we are talking about technology in a broad scale, including wheelchairs and so on. What do you, give us some examples of some of the startups with the work that they're doing, so that we get an idea of exactly where you're going with this, some really striking examples.
Sure.
And then maybe you can also tell us, how do you help? So that maybe some of us can look at your model and see where they can adopt that.
Sure, Peter. Happy to share. See, in visual impairment, in fact, we say, unfortunately, that India is the blind capital of the world, right? And that's something which we are not proud of. but there are so many people with visual impairment, blindness in India. One of the startups, IDs, started with their application to help a blind person, on mobility. So if I'm blind, Peter, if I call you, first question probably is going to ask me, where are you, Pratik? And probably this is why I'm calling you for, because I'm lost. It's very easy to get lost in countries like India and Sri Lanka. And so that app helps person to really identify where he or she is, identify where is the next bus stop, a restaurant, or an ATM, and stuff like that. It also helps to read the currency, because to pay to the in the bus or a taxi. It has a phenomenal PDF reader, which is use case for students. They are able to do all their education using that whole app. It does just digitize the content, of the book, and it reads through. And in fact, to the point which somebody made earlier, it is available in all Indian languages and around 14 foreign languages as well. So that was their initial use case. But then what we did is we helped them to grow their product portfolio, and they developed artificial intelligence, machine learning focused, based, glass called ID Cam, which you can wear, a person with vision impairment can wear and walk around, independently. So it takes that the whole equipment or the product takes video and audio as an input and gives audio output through the collarbone. In fact, they won a global global competition, and they were selected by a country outside, where they were helping the government, for their visual impairment people to move around, freely. And now their use case again is, if you look at educational institution, they have a lot of students with visual impairment, and it's very difficult to go to the classes, to the canteen, and stuff like that. And typically these campuses are like 100-acre campuses, right? How a person with visual impairment or student with visual impairment move around. So they have developed a AR, VR based technology, which is helping students with vision impairment move around independently. Now, in a typical setting, you have to really change the tiles or the whole physical infrastructure,
yes.
which doesn't make really economic sense. Hence, AR VR is actually changing the game. So that's one. I'll take a very brief example of a startup based out of Delhi. We all have seen, kids who cannot hear speak. So hence we say deaf and dumb, right? But that's not the nature. That's not the how they because they cannot hear the feedback mechanism. It's not completed, and hence they are not able to speak. It's not by any medical condition. A lot of them are able to speak. While in the Western world, we have seen people who can't hear speak, and this really is the intervention which is early in their life. Now there is a startup in Delhi which is using their tech to make kids speak while they can't hear, to complete that feedback mechanism. And how great it is, while they'll be able to complete their education and also find jobs as they grow. So these are a couple of examples. I can take more, but hopefully it gives you and everybody an art of possible through tech.
Yeah, and I'll come back to you about how exactly you intervene to how do you inspire these people? What does it take to get them to do this? And then also when they market it, does it become so expensive that it's beyond the reach of, so we might come to that. Gopi, I'll just turn it to the other side, because you are working with people, with children and all of that through the MDF Charitable Foundation. If you were to, ask, of the community to work on a specific aspect of this problem, what would that be, given your experience? If there are one or two things that you think can be easily done and we can get it started, given your experience on the other side of actually seeing and working with people who have these disabilities, what would you suggest that we give our minds to in terms of local innovation?
See, the lack of awareness itself is a barrier and a challenge for, because not only for people using it, also for organizations or people who are sort of working, developing these devices. And like say, that's one area which has to be particularly supported, to sort of have more people using it, because one is creating an awareness about these devices. The WHO has a list of assistive devices, particularly for each condition, like say different disability, they have different assistive devices. We need to create awareness about like that. And won't believe when we introduced this Avas app, there were like myths of families using that, because they thought, like, a lot of people still think that when you use a communication app or a device, the child will never speak, because this is to support. The assistive device is not just to replace, it is to support and make, and even to support their speech, also to help them to improve in their communication. So in all these assistive devices, there are many myths and many sort of beliefs that sort of changes their sort of way of using it, or whether to adapt those equipments. So creating awareness is one very important step for the local community. I think that will be a very big thing. Not only that will open the eyes of people who are sort of wanted to innovate something for them, also for people using.
Great point, Gopi. The point that just go out there and make people aware that there is such a huge disparity and inequality being exacerbated, because technology itself is now causing greater inequality and divide. So thank you for that. So awareness is what you're talking about. Pete, may I turn to a little technical with you? Now, when I was preparing for this, I understood, because there was a friend of mine, or a person I knew through some other people, whose son was autistic. And suddenly, they found that he could start using a device. And it was amazing. He started typing or telling, or I don't know, I couldn't get the details of things that were from his childhood. It was all there, and it was all coming out, and they were so blown away that this child was just so inside himself. Now, he was a young adult at that point. So then I came across this whole concept called the augmentative and alternative communication, right? AAC, and how that's helping, particularly in this range of autism, because they are comfortable in that space to be of themselves and not be with others. And so that is part of the problem, right? Would you like to share some thoughts on, from your experience, on this whole idea of augmentative and alternative communication in a very practical way? Maybe you can speak a little more about how people can start engaging with this kind of technology. Please, Pete.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, communication is a fundamental human element. Right. You know, our ability to communicate with each other, to express you know, love or hope or what we intent of what we want to do. And an alternative and augmentative communication is a device that allows you to input it in a number of different ways. And there are new technologies that are being developed around that as well. Now we can use literally a gaze of an eye in a similar way that some computer games and gaming companies have been able to harness. We can now use the gaze of our eyes to actually kind of fix on certain phrases or words that then allow someone to be able to communicate. Sometimes head switching. But the really interesting area of development is actually been around brain-computer interface. So how do we take a function from the brain directly out of that and to control a device or to control something external to our body? So that is literally reading brain waves and intent from our brain to be able to then use that to control another device. Now, the space of kind of autism is a really, really interesting one. I guess in many ways, people have been pushed aside if they are kind of believed to be autistic. And yet we're actually seeing that, you know, autism is a spectrum of disability. But we're actually seeing that there's quite a bit of work that's actually happening now around some of the extraordinary new ways of viewing the world that, some of those who are autistic actually do have. Ability to pattern match. So to look at a series of things and actually be able to kind of figure out a pattern of things that are happening within that. And that, of course, is in incredible use in data analytics and in kind of areas of kind of great need within big corporate companies now. And we've worked with a startup called Exceptional. They're providing a number of online tests that someone with autism can actually go ahead and do to be able to see if they're suited to particular tech jobs. So I think it's a really, really exciting world of being able to recognize the gifts and unique abilities that someone is actually bringing to that, as well as this opportunity for technology to be able to allow someone to communicate in a different way.
Fantastic, Pete. Thank you. Kelvin, a quick question from you about, you know, in the context of creating awareness. Firstly, you know, it's amazing that you have started this initiative. I'm just wondering whether, because you're part of SLASCOM, whether there is any effort underway, you know, driven by you or the others to start looking at this, because you see, you made this great point, which is something that I also read, that do not think of this whole accessibility as a retrofit. You know, you make an application for what we think is the normative world. Am I correct? Did I understand you correctly? And then try to say, okay, let's see. But rather than like this mobile first, say, no, it's universal. It's a universal design we think of. So in that context, and given that Sri Lanka is trying very hard also to make a mark in terms of a destination for development, software development, wouldn't there be a very interesting and important niche that we can really focus on if some organization like SLASCOM were to pay attention to this and try to create an ecosystem and fight for government assistance and all that? Am I asking for too much?
No, I think definitely, Peter, because I think SLASCOM recently started a really good initiative, which is called Tech for Good. And under that, we are looking at how we can develop tech to tackle some of the key sustainable issues. One is the carbon footprint and so on. And we had a couple of events and webinars where we kind of got some of the industry's top experts when it comes to inclusivity and accessibility tech. And we had a couple of webinars as well where we introduced this concept when we are developing software and products, where we need to follow certain frameworks. For example, there are frameworks which are been introduced by the World Wide Web Consortium, which is called WCAG. And under that, there are AA, AAA standards, where when you develop software, mobile apps or whatever, it needs to go to an audit process to see whether those standards are met. For example, if a person who has colorblind issues or a person who can't actually type, then you need to use certain technologies and change the interface, the UX and UI. Maybe you would stick to speech and speech to text and develop those. So there's a lot of awareness happening from SLASCOM in. And I guess we can do much more as well, because in this part of the world, when it comes to the investment and the backing for startups specifically in this area, I see there's a lack in it. And I think if you look at some of the work that Pete and Pratik is doing is wonderful, because they are bringing the financial backing to back these startups, right? So we try to do a lot of hackathons as well from SLASCOM side. Recently, we did a hackathon where you use certain AI and machine learning technologies to develop solutions to tackle sustainability issues. We partnered with UNDP to push this, and UNDP in Sri Lanka, brought some of the main local issues in the country, like primary healthcare related to HIV, communicable diseases, certain issues related to wildlife. So we are trying to do as much as possible to create awareness for the universities and the kids from a SLASCOM
standpoint. I just want to quickly, Calvin, just to say that to your point about technology for revenue and for wealth and all of that. And I completely respect the fact that SASCOM is giving a number that we need to make 3 billion in terms of exports, which is great. I'm just wondering, to your point, whether an initiative can be underway in which it tells its members that we are going to have some key milestone indicators or KPIs that over the period of time that we would expect you to do whatever it takes. And I don't know what those milestones are. It could be, your applications must have 10% or whatever of the new applications must have this concept, or you must actually employ disabled people to start with, so that there is, a kind of a gentle compulsion, a gentle nudge. Is that feasible, you think? And is that something that we should undertake, both self-consciously and through the organization creating that consciousness and kind of imposing that in a certain way?
I think definitely we can. And I think we have started with the initial steps around this. And for example, as you mentioned, Peter, like getting talent, getting people with disabilities into organizations, it's important, right? I mean, if you're talking about inclusivity and, all of this, we should give the opportunities to them. And we have seen global companies, for example, like Microsoft, they, publish this publicly and they get people with disabilities to come on board, because when they're developing these products, you need people who have that experience, right? So they encourage that. And I definitely think through our initiatives, we definitely can do that. And we have started some of these initiatives, but there's more work to do. But I do agree with you 100% that we need to fully focus on this.
Thank you. Turning that round to you, Prateek, what do you see as some of the big obstacles or the challenges in creating this startup ecosystem to focus on this? Because it looks like there is, even if you look at, end of the day, a company would also want to be sustainable financially. They're not in it for, and you don't want it to be seen as charity. You're the very person who said, no, this is not charity. This is about harnessing economic power. So obviously in doing so, you can create economic value for your organization as well. But having said that, having you being there, trying to get these startups going, and maybe Pete can also join, throw in a comment or two. What do you see as some of the challenges that are in the way of getting companies to start, or for companies themselves to get going, with special emphasis on technology, for inclusive technology?
So Pete, for a startup, the biggest challenge is that people don't believe that this is large enough a market. Okay. And again, this goes back to the whole point of view of charity. See, inclusion and diversity has to be a business strategy. It cannot be seen as a charity, in your organization. And there is a phenomenal report by an institution in Europe which talks about return on investment on assistive technology. It's 1:9. Obviously, we don't need venture capital. We need more patient capital to be invested in companies and in startups in assistive technology. So that's number one, which is more to do with awareness. I think there are enough and more data and statistics and examples that this is big enough a market, but I think it's just creating more awareness. That's one. Second is the distribution challenge. Most of the countries, and especially the South Asian or Asian countries, people with disability population is large, but that's just one challenge. In India, for example, 70% of people with disabilities live in rural areas. Now, how are we going to distribute that whole technology, to rural areas, right? So that's second. Third is the affordability, which I think it's two-part. One is the ability to pay, which is a challenge. And there are enough and more newer techniques and examples and business model by which it can be solved. So it's nothing which cannot be solved. But it's also the willingness to pay. New tech is great to use, but how many of us would love to pay for it? How many of us would love to pay for the app, all the apps we use in our mobile, right? So it's the ability to pay, which is affordability, but also the willingness to pay is an issue. And hence it comes to how do you really monetize the product you're making for a person who probably has no ability to pay. Yeah, these are the top three challenges, but I'm sure Pete, please feel free to add.
Yeah, and before I turn to Pete, Pete, just 1 second, Pete. I just want to make sure that we are not missing out. I was looking for the chat to see if there are questions, but before I invite you to comment on this, I would also like to quickly ask whether there are anybody in the audience who'd like to ask a question live. I was holding on because I didn't see any questions on chat, but I thought I'll give you the chance to ask any questions. So please switch on your mics and make a brief introduction, who you are, what organization, if you like to. If not, that's fine. Ask the panel a question, please. I'm sure some of you must have at least one question, because I think a lot of ideas have been expressed to get our minds going, thinking about this very interesting topic.
Yes, Peter, we just have somebody raising their hand.
By the way, you manage that, Nandini, go ahead.
Hold on, let me, if you could just send us your question through the chat feature, that would be great. I saw somebody just raised their hand. I could not.
Or maybe the person can even ask it live. Is that possible? Is that allowed? Are you allowed them to open their mics and ask a question?
Yeah, Peter, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, my name is Prasanna Kuruppu. Actually, rather than a question, this is a small comment I had to make.
Go ahead, Prasanna.
I'm the president of Sri Lanka Foundation for the Rehabilitation of the Disabled. I'm also working for many other organizations, nationally, internationally, and regionally. The comment I want to make is this is a very, very good dialogue you're having today. We have to first understand the realities of the disability here. And Gopi mentioned about the awareness, it's a very good thing, but sensitization is very, very important. And also when we think about the technology, we have to look at in these two approaches. First one is the main cause for disabled people are the social barriers. The social barriers are working in two ways. One is the movement. For the movement, we need assistive devices. The other one is the communication. If you look at the whole thing in these two perspectives, I think we can have many more other things outside the box. I know the technology is a very, very important thing, and even the legislation part also, there are so many conventions, and also in Sri Lankan context, we have a disability policy which is in 2003, which has mentioned very extensively about research and innovation technologies, but no one has resourced those documents. But rather than this, the tech giants and also the other stakeholders who are involved should look at this in a more responsible way, rather than looking at the lens of corporate social responsibility, but as a main responsibility of their business. So for that, you have to have you have to invest in this area. One way to do is to get people with disabilities who can be the researchers and associate them and understand their issues, trying to get into their shoes. Then the things will be very much easier. Microsoft is investing about $50 million a year for accessibility and new products. So likewise, the tech giants in Sri Lanka and other countries can look at it in that fashion, rather than looking at this lens of corporate social responsibility, but as one of their main business.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that, Prasanna. Any other? Thank you very much. That was a very useful insight from someone who's on the other side, organizing the other side of the population, who are actually the directly involved in this conversation. Thank you for that perspective. Anyone else with questions before I go to Pete? Because we're also running out of time. So we'd like to take a question from the audience just to see how you are looking at this problem from where you are seated. Okay, in the absence of Pete, just to move to a slide so that we don't get stuck with that same question. Now, on this point about technology, getting the right resources into this. What is your experience in Australia, either from the state side or from large corp? I mean, to be very honest, I'm very happy to hear names being used of technology giants, but I was also involved with technology for the last 30 years or more, working with some of the really large companies. And to be absolutely honest, Pete, I didn't see any real effort on their part to make that vital investment. It was not even in any of their measurables. You know, it may have been just a tiny drop in the bucket somewhere so that they can tick some box and say that, you know, we have done our part. I never saw that as a key initiative of theirs in the country to measure their success. To Calvin's point about technology they only looked at their numbers and their growth and their sales commissions and so on. I'm sorry to be brutal about this, but do you see, is there a different experience that you're having in Australia, both from corporate and from the governments and state or central government?
Yes and no. I think that you know, we for the vast majority of companies, this isn't a thought that comes across their mind. It is a part of the population that they design for the middle 50th percentile, and they hope for the best for everyone else, or it's not even a thought process. But I do think that companies like Microsoft, Calvin's already mentioned, I think are starting to take the lead on that. Apple has been a leader in this space for a number of years globally. And they really do have an approach in their values that is about you know, not leaving anyone behind. Toyota have come out and said something similar in recent days as well, that they're trying to create future mobility for all, and they don't want to see anyone left behind. And so I think we do see a turning in this space. And to be honest, I actually think that you know, some of it is not right down to just seeing their corporate social responsibility. They see that there's an ability to make a dollar in this space as well. To Pratik's point, there is an opportunity here for an underserved market to be able to, you know, with around the world a rising middle class. With that comes people with disability. Now, I think that Pratik has also put his finger on the pulse of some of the challenges that we're also seeing, and there is certainly worldwide something called the disability wealth gap. And if you are someone living with a disability, there's a high chance that you're actually going to be living either in poverty or you're approaching being in poverty. And so now, in answer to the second part of your question, Peter, our government in Australia have definitely taken a slightly different view of disability. Some of it is under challenge. We've had a new policy that's come in the last 10 years that is really trying to see how do we provide the right amount of supports for people with disability to enter the workplace. And then through a taxation system, that scheme will then pay for itself, is the way that this scheme is being designed. And I think it's a very, very smart thing to be able to say we are all wanting more talent in our workforces. So how can we just provide the supports that someone needs in order to access the workplace? And then perhaps we'll actually see a different view of the way that disability is being treated. Some of that is under challenge from different sides of government, but
I can see where the challenge will come from. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. So I do think that there is a change in corporate companies to look at this space in a different way, which I think is really, really exciting.
Thank you very much. And considering that it's now 5 o'clock and it's good to always start and end on time, I would invite each of you, and we'll go in reverse order. Maybe Calvin, you can go first with your last thoughts, a quick 1-minute thought. What would you like to leave your listeners? What's the thought that you would like them to reflect upon so that they can hopefully start getting engaged with this very, very important topic?
Yeah. So Peter, my personal thought is that for the tech companies and the entrepreneurs around technology, to motivate yourself and build solutions for these kind of areas. Not to think of building the next TikTok app, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many things like that, right? I think it has come to a point personally that I rethink about where technology really needs to innovate. So my personal thought for the next generation and the startups is to build solutions to tackle these are the real problems, right? Because other problems we create from technology and we're trying to solve problems, right? So that is my personal thought.
Thank you very much, Kelvin. Prateek, your thoughts, your final 1 minute thoughts on that you want to leave behind?
Peter, I'll summarize it with 3 A's. First A is awareness, and I think we need more to create more awareness about disability issues, how technology can be a transformational element to change lives of people with disabilities. So first A is awareness. Second is amplify. There is so much happening around the world. We need to really amplify the use of technology in disability, which is a great enabler, like we spoke for last 1 hour or so. But we need to amplify that whole impact. And third is accelerate. Now we're talking about 1 billion or more people with disabilities, right? If we don't accelerate the impact or the interventions or the technology use, now we are not going to be able to change lives of more and more people. I think the best time to collaborate was yesterday. I think we got it together, put our minds to see what is the next best time. But I'm so happy that MillenniumIT has put together this whole event to create that awareness, and I'm sure things are only going to look up and positive, as we go forward. But thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Gopi, your final thoughts, please.
Actually, I would like to add 2 A's on what Prateek said. Affordability and availability. And I just want to ask one question to all the high-tech companies which are making these devices. Why can't you make this for everyone? Why you are making it just for your country? And this is like, say, what happens, like you want to get a proper wheelchair or a walker or walking aid. The people from, or the families from low or low middle income countries can never imagine to afford for those. So I know the quality of those devices is good, but why can't you make it affordable for the whole 1 billion? That's one thing.
Thank you very much, Gopi. That was great. Pete, your final thoughts, please.
It feels like I should add another A in there. So maybe I'll add, make things adaptive. Disability isn't one size fits all. So think about ways that you can make it adaptive to your users. But the second thing I'd say is don't let fear stop you. Start somewhere. Do something now that ask yourself, what is that one step that I can take to make the world more inclusive? I think we're going to be better off when our disabled brothers and sisters can join in these conversations. And so start somewhere.
Thank you very much, Pete. And for myself, I first like to commend Millennium Information Technology for putting this together and for inviting me, because I have certainly started looking at this very differently. I must say quite ashamedly that while I was in technology for so many years, for the past 30 years, this has not really caught my attention. So I want to start with me and make a very open confession that this had not caught my attention enough. I retired only 2 years ago from my company, and we did absolutely nothing. And likewise at Millennium when I was there. So I'm really, really glad that you have started this conversation, Calvin, and the rest of your team. Rahul, who's also behind this, invited me. So thank you for that. And secondly, the point is, I don't think we can wait for government to move in. I mean, to Prasanna's point, we had a war that caused so many of our people and soldiers on either side of the divide to lose their limbs. And we have still a very poor government intervention to make public places accessible to people in wheelchairs. So I don't think we need to wait for that. but I think it's us to create that consciousness that Calvin and all of you spoke about, that this is not only a problem, but this is an opportunity to look at it differently and to do something about it. And Calvin, I'm happy to lend my voice to whatever you want to do in our IT and beyond that community. And I want to leave with this thought about innovation and cheap innovation. Gopi, our famous friend Arunachala Muruganandan, the pad man. I mean, he didn't have a scientific mind, he only had inquiring mind. And look at the change he made. I mean, these machines that made pads used to cost 35 million Indian rupees. And because he was so vested in this problem, he was so caught up in it. And he thought, I need to do something. And he made a machine with the assistance then of IIT and so on, that only cost 65,000 from 35 million. And look at the lives it has changed. It has not only made women, it's not only solved the problem of hygiene, it has solved the problem of unemployment, solved the problem of education, because young children do not go to school when they're menstruating, having their periods. And most importantly, it's given women a sense of dignity that they can be out there. This does not need to be something that will hold them back. So with that thought of the wonderful work of an inquiring mind of an ordinary man called Arunachala Muruganandan, we hope we draw inspiration from that. And all of us play our part. Thank you very much once again for all of you speakers for taking the time, the effort, and the enthusiasm that you brought to this subject. I believe that you're all totally vested in it as human beings, as people, and not doing this just as a job. So I thank you for that perspective. Calvin, once again to you and Millennium team, and let's start this journey in Sri Lanka, and I'll do whatever I can. Thank you very much. Over to you, Nalini.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, we are ready to conclude today's session. Just to share a few words to our audience. Thank you so much for joining with us today. To our panelists, thank you for sharing your insights and knowledge on this topic of technology inclusion for disability. And of course, thank you, Peter, for carrying out this wonderful discussion. So with that note, that would be all from us today. I would like to highlight that today we complete the final MiTech Tuesday webinar for this year. We will be back again next year with more interesting topics for you. And I sincerely hope that everybody who attended today is able to take something positive back home to make a change, to make a difference. Take care and have yourselves a very good evening.